Okay, so the second principle, the opportunity cost principle, I think is a little bit less obvious, but it's just as important. So the opportunity cost principle states that the true cost of something is what you give up to get it. Now that seems obvious, right? If you want to buy a new laptop, what you give up is $1,000 or something along there. However, the opportunity cost principle also suggests that what you give up is not strictly financial. What it is the value of the next best alternative. It's what else you could be doing with that $1,000. And it's important to consider here that what you give up to get something isn't only money. You're also giving up time, and you're giving up what else you could be doing with the resources needed to secure that benefit. And so we think that we are only acting rationally if, when we make our cost benefit decisions, we're not only thinking about how much we have to pay to receive a benefit, but also the alternative which we are abandoning to secure that benefit. And so we're going to make this point a little bit more clear with a graphic on the next slide, and also we're going to return to it a couple videos from now with some more examples. But to provide a little bit more detail now, we would think that when agents make these cost-benefit decisions, they only act rationally when they consider the opportunity costs in addition to the prices or other costs, and that if you want to really highlight the opportunity cost of a decision, then a trick to doing this would be to insert the word "or" into the question of whether or not you should make a decision. For example, if you are thinking about what is the cost of sleeping in and not attending class, then to remind yourself of the opportunity cost of sleeping in, you would say, should I sleep in or should I go to class? And so the opportunity cost of sleeping in is going to class. It's what you give up to secure that benefit of a little more rest. Now, to make this point a little bit more clear, we're going to think of 4 relationships between opportunity cost and financial expenses, because not all examples of dollars changing hands, of paying a monetary cost, are an opportunity cost, and not all opportunity costs are financial expenses. So to make this point a little bit more clear, I want to use an example from the Wolfers and Stevenson textbook, which differentiates opportunity costs and financial expenses and shows where they overlap as well. So the example that they use is thinking about the decision about whether to pursue a graduate degree. And remember here, a way to remind yourself of the opportunity cost of pursuing a professional graduate degree is saying, should I pursue a professional graduate degree, or should I continue to work my current job? And so a quick point I would like to make about the decision about whether to pursue a professional graduate degree is that most professional graduate degrees come with a considerable financial expense. If you want to be a physician, if you want to be a lawyer, if you want to pursue an MBA, a Master's of Business Administration, there's typically an out-of-pocket expense which is quite considerable. If you want to pursue a PhD, most of the time that is paid for. You do not need to pay for tuition, and in fact, your graduate school will pay you to get that degree. So in this example, we're going to think about the decision to pursue, for example, a Master's of Business Administration. So there are some financial expenses which are also opportunity costs. If we think about what you have to pay in tuition, that's obviously a dollar amount, but it's also an opportunity cost because you could be taking that $40,000 that you're paying in tuition and buy a pontoon boat. And so you are giving up the dollar amount that the pontoon boat costs to pay for tuition. And so because that is the value of the next best alternative, then that is an opportunity cost. And because dollar values are leaving your hand, that is also a financial expense. Now, you are also paying for room and board when you pursue a graduate degree. However, even though the dollars are leaving your hand for room and board, it's not an opportunity cost because you would need to pay for it anyway. You would need to pay for housing and for food whether or not you pursue a graduate degree. And so because you are not giving up anything to pursue room and board, that is something you would have had to have done anyway. That's not an opportunity cost. However, the salary that you are foregoing by not working, for example, if you were earning $50,000, then that is an opportunity cost. But because you are not paying $50,000 additionally to get the graduate degree, it's not money that is leaving your hand, you are not handing it to somebody, then it's not a financial expense. But when we think about the true cost of getting the graduate degree, we need to add what you are paying in tuition to the salary which you are foregoing. And so if it's $40,000 in tuition and $50,000 in lost salary, the real cost of that graduate degree is $90,000, which is a lot more than we would previously have thought. However, there are also examples of non-financial expenses which are not opportunity costs. For example, the time spent studying once enrolled. So once you've made the decision to attend graduate school, to pursue this graduate degree, you have already made the decision to not work anymore since you're attending school full time, and you are not giving up any hours then to be studying, because that is part of the decision to attend graduate school. And so we can think about, when we think about this difference between opportunity costs and financial expenses, and we add the opportunity costs together, then we get a better idea of what the true cost of a decision is, which is going to allow us to make more informed and more efficient decisions. So similar to the opportunity cost principle, the marginal principle is not intuitive. I think this is one that may not seem immediately obvious if you are new to economics or if you haven't thought about what real efficient decision making requires, but it's just as important as the previous two principles. So the marginal principle states that when we make decisions regarding quantities, for example, how many years of graduate school we should pursue, how many gigabytes of internet connection speed we should purchase, then these decisions are made incrementally, that it's not all or nothing. We aren't buying 10 pounds of ground beef a month or 0. We're deciding whether we want to buy 1 more pound of ground beef every month. And so the way that we're going to think about this decision is going to be a difference between questions which are how many and either or. And so the marginal principle is going to apply to questions which ask how many or how much, but the relationship is actually kind of complicated. So to make efficient decisions, you always need to break the how many question down into a series of small either or questions. So instead of saying, again, how many pounds of ground beef should I buy every month? We don't say, should I buy 7? Should I buy 6? Should I buy 5? We think about the decision about whether to buy a single pound of ground beef. We say, should I buy 0 or should I buy 1? Do the benefits of buying 1 outweigh the cost of buying 1? And once you make that decision, then you go incrementally a bit more. You say, should I buy a 2nd pound of ground beef? Do the benefits of that 2nd pound exceed the cost of buying that 2nd pound? If so, then you question, should I buy a 3rd? And that's what we mean by incremental decision making, that we should break down any quantitative question of how many or how much into a series of yes or no questions. This marginal principle applies to questions which ask how many. But by breaking that how many question down into a series of either or questions, then we can better understand marginal costs versus marginal benefits. Now, you can break a big either or question down into a series of, into a how many question, and then apply the marginal principle. So for example, assume that you're buying a new home and you are deciding between living downtown near shops and entertainment, or you are deciding about living in the suburbs where you can have more land. There may be schools with higher grades, with a better chance of getting into a good college. And this question at first does seem like an either or question. Should I live near restaurants and shops, or should I and have little land, small acreage, or should I live with lots of land, but with a farther travel to go out to eat? However, even though this seems like a big either or question, we can break it down into a decision of how many questions. So how many miles from downtown do you want to live? How long of a commute to work do you want to have? Once it becomes a how many question or a how much, we can then use the marginal principle to decide whether the benefits of living 1 mile closer to downtown with greater access to restaurants outweigh the costs, which are the opportunity costs of giving up more acreage. We would then repeat this marginal analysis until the benefits no longer outweigh the costs of the last incremental decision. The rational rule, which we're going to discuss a little bit more in the next slide, says that we need to continue making this decision until the marginal benefits are equal to the marginal costs. So you are making a benefit cost decision, including the opportunity cost in your consideration, importantly, and making this decision on the margin, meaning incrementally, and we are considering the benefits and costs of a little bit more or a little bit less. When you follow this rule, you maximize your well-being, your happiness, your economic surplus. In most cases in the real world, you will not have an equation or a graph or a table to tell you what the marginal costs and marginal benefits of a decision will be beforehand. However, you can still utilize this rational rule by trial and error and by making a better decision in the future. So if you decide to marginally increase the quantity of a commodity which you are buying or a decision which you are making, you can evaluate the costs and benefits of that decision after the fact, after you make that buy the product. And you can determine if the marginal cost exceeded the marginal benefit. For example, if you're studying for a test in one of your 3 classes and you don't know whether you should study 1 more hour, then you can decide to study 1 more hour for this test and see if the benefits of that extra hour outweigh the costs by comparing how you did on this exam to how you did on previous exams, and comparing that to your performance in your other classes. If your grade on your economics exam increased by more than the decrease in the score of your other exams, then the marginal benefit of that extra hour of studying for economics would outweigh the marginal costs. And in the future, you may be justified in spending even an extra hour studying for the economics exam. However, once you realize that your other scores are dropping by more than your economic scores are increasing, then you should marginally cut back on that additional hour studying economics and decrease it by 1, for example. And so on the next slide, we'll try to tie this together even a little bit more. So just to summarize what we were saying on the previous slide, when we combine those 3 principles, when we combine the marginal principle, opportunity cost principle, cost benefit principle, we create the rational rule. And that implies that agents should continue making a decision until the marginal benefits of that decision are equal to the marginal costs, including the opportunity costs. And so in the next video, we're going to consider the different types of models, which we will encounter in this class. But it's important to remember that economists make these assumptions about individuals and economic agents because they think that this is how people should behave, and that you are going to be better off in your personal life, in your professional life, if you make decisions in accordance with this rational rule, depending on whatever your objective function is, depending on what matters to you, what brings you happiness. So once again, on the next set of videos, we will consider how the different models in this class are going to be similar and how they're going to be different.